addition to minute 278, referring to a long discussion about the General Reserve and the capital programme for the Council. Just so that you're aware that this was a long discussion, we had the Council's accountant with us, and I think we discussed this issue for something like an hour while we thought about it and got our heads around it. Just so you're aware that what is written here is not the result of a quick session. It was actually a very long and detailed discussion, out of which came a recommendation on page 3, asking you to endorse the approach outlined from A to F, spanning from page 2 to page 3. There is also a recommendation, minute number 280, which concerns a temporary variation to the imprest account. And there is a recommendation, minute number 282, to do with the disposal of a portable staff welfare unit. Does that mean a toilet?
The old cripple.
Do any members have any questions relating to any of these issues? Are you happy to receive and adopt the minutes? Yes. Councillor Smith.
Well, it's not a question, statement. It's just this. I think that it's extremely important that members get to grips with 278A, which is the replenishment of our general reserve to the typical operating levels. This is something which is essential that we must achieve, and we should try and achieve that as soon as we possibly can. It is that we should be operating with the reserve levels that are recommended.
Councillor Ewing?
Can I just ask if you've got such a review of being in or after June? Is that 2018? Because later in the report it refers to 1920. So
no, the intention was it would be 2018.
Could we add that to these minutes then, so it's just clear? Yeah.
The thinking was to let the get the pannier market back online after its improvement works, and then we'll be in a better position to see how it's functioning.
Right.
Are there any further questions? Are you okay? Receive and adopt. Councillor Johnson seconding. Thank you. All in favour?
With the recommendations.
With the recommendation. Okay. Thank you very much. So, agenda item 6, capital programme. If I could call upon the General Manager to explain what he has in mind.
You've all had a report circulated, which was a follow-on from the budget and policy meeting and discussions around potential additional capital spend. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build on the opportunity of having the pannier market vacant to try and deliver some internal improvement works. Part of your question might be, why are we reviewing it now as opposed to bringing this to council earlier? We're looking to improve the heating and lighting. Now, that was off the back of the benefits of seeing what we had delivered in Butchers Hall, which was only complete by the back end of November. And we're also looking at trying to do improvements in relation to the existing Pannier Market Cafe, or Bob's Cafe, where we changed the operating structure with regards to originally Bob's Cafe was going to be relocated in 3 East End stores. In November he requested that he preferred to stay in situ, so we had to build a temporary structure to house him within the Pannier Market. On seeing that built in early January, it's become apparent to Town Council and also to the current tenant that there are real benefits of keeping an internal structure in situ, which then lends us the opportunity to rehouse the current office space as well, which has long been discussed about not being adequate enough to house 2 members of staff and deal with public and deal with confidential matters. So looking at the capital programme, we have looked at a number of projects where we have made savings on the capital programme, and also a number of projects which have been allocated monies which we think we can either reduce on the spend or put those projects on hold so that we can deliver the internal improvements, which are really a once in a building's opportunity, because we're not going to have the building vacated for a long period of time after this contract. So we are looking at trying to deliver something which is cost neutral to the existing capital programme, which is trying to deliver improvements around lighting, the same as Butcher's Hall. A slight revision to the existing report that you've had, where we've talked about taking out the existing heating and replacing it with heating that's currently in Butcher's Hill, where we've reviewed that with regards to the current spend. We're now looking at just improving the existing gas system, which is putting heating along the area where there's no heating, along the lock-up area, and also improving the existing system around efficiency within the central hall. And also, like I said, building a bespoke cafe space internally and an extension and a refurbishment to the existing toilets. That's in relation to the Pannier Market. There's also the additional 50,000 that we've looked at allocating in relation to Meadows Play Park to improve the surfacing. I think it's been well documented within council meetings, on social media, etc. There's a serious issue around drainage down in the meadows, and the safety surfacing we tried to put in, which was a grass matting, hasn't been effective with the rest of the infrastructure in there, and we need to look at trying to install wet pour. And to install wet pour, we've got a contractor currently lined up who can progress his works at the back end of March for the toddler area, and about another 4 or 5 pieces of kit down in the meadows, which I think will be a vast improvement around having a play area that can be utilised all year round, as opposed to just when you've got good weather conditions.
Thank you very much. Do members have any question for the General Manager? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it's not a question really, but it's the fact that I think councillors need to be aware of what this means. What the General Manager is saying is all it's all stuff that we actually want to do. But what we need to do is remember tonight the sort of financial atmosphere in which we'd be committing to doing this. It is, as the report states, not feasible or appropriate to seek an increase in capital spend, which is not what this report is doing. But what the report is not truly highlighting is that the capital spend is at a very high level, and a level which we as a council are dealing with. Although I fully support what is being proposed in this report, I think it's worth noting that we are operating now at a level, a financial capital spend level, which is, and it does state in 3.4 in the report, is about we're now talking about the appetite for this council for risk. And I would suggest to you and to council, Mr Deputy Mayor, that the risk is that in a short period of time something comes down the line which we will be asked to make a capital commitment, and it will be the situation where we have agreed that it's neither feasible nor appropriate to make that capital commitment. And I think members need to be aware that that is the risk we are running. We are running at top level. Anything coming down the line, and I as a councillor am aware of certain proposals of stuff that could be coming down the line, and the situation we are in, unless we can find capital spend from somewhere else, we will have to not accept certain proposals that may be coming to us. I just wanted to make clear at this point that there is a risk, although what the General Manager is proposing is all very well and should be supported, but there is a risk to this council.
Thank you. Yes.
I was happy to support this and still am, but I'm now a bit concerned when you're telling me that there are risks that you know about that I don't know about that are coming down the line. I think before we take a vote, it would seem sensible to know what these risks are, if indeed they are very serious risks. If you know something that's going to make us all look very silly in a year, I think we need to know.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I don't actually, it's not been formally proposed, but it has been mooted on several occasions that anything which West End Borough Council does not have to do by law, it will discard. And one of the things that it does not have to do is public toilets. Now, if public toilets were to be divested West Avon and they were offered to us to take on board, and we've made a commitment to the highest level where we have no capital, what would we do? Would we, we would have to make some serious decisions at that point. And I'm just concerned that we're working to such a tight margin. I'm happy to do it, but as long as everybody's aware that we're working to such tight levels, such tight margins with capital and with revenue, that if anything comes along and it's a little bit of a, it comes as a bit of a shock to us, we won't have anything, we'll have to find a way of dealing with it at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Ewing.
Mr Town Clerk or Councillor Mrs Evans, have we had anything from West Devon to say that that is happening this year and that will be happening within your budget this year?
They're looking into all the things that we provide, and there's a statutory bills that we have to carry on, but they're all being looked at.
But that's not for this financial year, is it? Coming up?
On, say, 100% of the big issue next year, but they will be looking at all the services that are on statutory.
But we wouldn't be given, like a week's notice. And you've got your main budget setting meeting on February the 27th. And from what I understand, Councillor Jory didn't say anything. Have you had any notification that it may be happening this year?
No, we've received nothing formally.
No. So hopefully that may allay people's concerns for the coming financial year. But if you know of any other little things that are coming down the line that you mentioned that you know about and that the rest of us don't, I think you have a duty to tell us, Councillor Smith.
I'm happy to leave it as it is.
I think Councillor Sullis is very right to remind us of the risk that all councils are running at this.
Smith.
Harry. Sorry, my apologies. I've completely forgotten the name now. Could you turn your sign around, please? Oh, Smith, yes, of course, yes. My apologies. I would say that we need to be aware of risk, which is quite rightly so, hence my previous splurge about contemporary investment rather than the heritage. And I think we have to think about contemporary issues such as public toilets, should they ever come to us, as being a crucial part of the town's contribution and the service. But I think the support of the council for recognising a general risk can be accepted. I don't hear of any particular individual risk, but we are running a very tight budget and we need to be aware of future pressures on that budget, which seem to be not dissipating.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yes, Councillor Crawford.
I would suggest that we are in a tight budget and that there will be risks, full stop really, because it is running so low. And I think it's prudent probably to do the work now. And I think, did I see that they were going to upgrade the toilets in the market itself? So, that would sort of alleviate that part of it. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments?
Move the recommendation. Well, second recommendation.
Okay, so are you all in favour of accepting the recommendations in these minutes? Thank you very much. So that brings us to the Development, Management and Licensing Committee. And as chairman of that committee, I'll present these minutes. So, a meeting of the committee on the 23rd of January, minute numbers 266 through to 274. Can I draw your attention to minute 270, town planning issues, paragraph B. This relates to proposed double yellow lining of Grenville Drive from Plymouth Road to the first junction on the left, double yellow lining being on the left-hand side of the road as you go away from Plymouth Road. A site visit of the Highways and Traffic Order Committee was paid to that site on the 8th of January. 3 town councillors were present. In addition, Councillor Evans from the borough and Councillor Sellis from the County Council were there, and the Mayor was present in his capacity as chairman of HATOC, that's the Highways and Traffic Order Committee. As a result of that visit, the chairman of HATOC referred the matter back to this council in collaboration with the relevant ward members of the Borough Council and the County Council to come forward with a recommendation. And there were effectively only 3 recommendations that we were in a position to offer. The first recommendation would be to support the full implementation of the traffic order as it was received. The second alternative was to oppose the traffic order in its entirety. And the third was to support partial implementation of the order. In other words, having double yellow lines, but not the full extent as currently described in the draft order. At the meeting of the Plans Committee, members of the public were present who put their view forward. We had a written response from the County Councillor, and Councillor Evans was present and gave a verbal response and followed that up with an email to me subsequently. It was the conclusion of your committee that we should recommend that the traffic order be implemented as proposed, i.e. double yellow lining along the left-hand side of the road up as far as the first junction to the left. Now, in doing so, we were very mindful of the problems of parking in that area. We have had many representations from the Westbridge cottagers who have seen their parking reduce progressively over the years and leaving them now with very little indeed, including nowhere really for short-term parking for people visiting the site or making deliveries. On the other hand, we have reports, admittedly verbal reports, of emergency services placing notices on parked cars in Grenville Drive, warning that they were concerned they would not get their vehicles through. If you visit that site in the evening, you will see cars parked on both sides of the road. It's only by cars on the right-hand side of the road, parking with 2 wheels on the pavement, that there is a way through for other vehicles. If cars were to park at the curbside on both sides, the road would be impassable. Taking all of these factors into account, your committee made this recommendation on the basis of safety, although fully recognising the additional inconvenience for the Westbridge cottagers. We are asking you to receive and endorse these minutes, and in so doing you would accept the recommendation, and that is a recommendation that would go forward to HATOC. However, you may wish to debate it, and therefore at this point I'd like to invite members to make any comments that they feel is appropriate. Councillor Crawford.
Yes, we have had a representation from someone who lives in Westbridge Cottages, who talks about the reduced, the loss of spaces. In total, in nearly 2000, they lost 30 spaces, and plans to be reduced now. Sorry, I'm just looking at this. Quite a lot of the properties have lost their parking spaces. And this person also talks about safety issues with not having parked cars, that people tend to speed, whereas parked cars does allow people, make sure that people slow down so that people on the road and children playing will be safer. So it's quite a few bits. I think other councillors might have got this representation. So, yeah, so you will have read that. And I think this person makes some pertinent points there.
Thank you. Councillor Hutton.
I also was looking at this letter that we got this morning, this email, with interest. The one thing that she did bring out is we hear about the emergency vehicles have told us there's a problem. How much have we evidence that there is a problem? I mean, I think quite a few of us have walked there at different times, and there certainly are. There's problems with cars parked up Grenville Down. But is it all people saying, well, I've heard somebody has said this, and do we actually know that there is a major problem for emergency vehicles?
Thank you.
Other residents?
Sure. We have not received anything from the emergency services ourselves. Yes.
I've actually heard from the fire brigade as well that they can't get through. People living up there have told me this, and it's very dangerous for disabled and people with prams. They have to walk in the road, which I think is most unacceptable in this day and age. I'm very sorry about Westbridge Cottages, but I lived in Dolphin Road and I had the same problem there. But it's one of those things, you know, in this modern age, we've all got cars, but it is dangerous road and I can't see how they can speed up Grenville Drive. It's impossible to speed up there.
I think the speeding was in relation to Plymouth Road, actually. Yes. Councillor Squires.
Thank you very much. I suspect, like other councillors, I've received representation about this issue. I still concur and agree with the original decision. However, I think we did say at the time that we need to consider about parking for other residents in the area. And what came to my attention was the removal of parking space by Devon County Council with the instigation of the crossing many years ago. And I would put an opinion forward that the reinstigation of that parking I would see as being not detrimental at all, because it's in an existing situation and might possibly, as some of the constituents say, reduce the speed of traffic on the A386 as it goes around. So I think there's a compromise solution if we approach Devon County. Why can't they reinstate the original parking as was before the traffic, the road crossing? Thank you.
I think what you're talking about there are two issues, really. Before us tonight is this particular draft traffic order, which we have to respond to. Then the reinstatement of parking on Plymouth Road would be a separate matter that is not in our gift. But it may be that the ward members for South East, I think it's South East there, or is it South West? South West, might act on behalf of residents to see whether that is something that could be pursued. Yes.
Deputy Mayor, I note with interest it says on the information here that they were looking at approaching Morrison's supermarket. I quite often drive by the vets, and the vets is usually very empty, a lot closer to Westbridge. Could it be that that's an area that's actually looked at in this respect?
Well, again, it's not in our gift, is it? But if people wanted to act on behalf of constituents and make inquiries, then why not? Yes, Councillor Crawford.
Yes. This person also talked about people, visitors, so care workers, plumbers, any work people that would have tools to offload. Could we not put in a recommendation? Sorry, I don't know if this is our gift, as you say. Could we not put in a recommendation about sort of if we reinstated the spaces that Councillor Squire was talking about, of like a 2-hour, perhaps, maximum sort of stay? Could that not be a recommendation? I don't know.
Bear with me while I take advice.
How can you respond? I think we need to be clear that it's the responsibility of the County Council as Highways Authority. If members wish to make recommendations for future usage, we can do that. But it needs to be very clear that it's not in our gift to actually give effect to it.
As part of our response to this.
You could add to that
We could
if
add
you
it as
wish,
a comment.
but that would clearly require a separate traffic regulation order.
Absolutely.
From the Highway Authority.
Yes. Okay, fine. I am advised that yes, we can indeed make such a comment, but it's not in the gift of this council to deliver it. It's in the hands of county council. But in whatever we decide, however we decide to respond to this traffic order, if there was to be a change of parking on Plymouth Road, that would require a separate traffic order to be drafted and submitted, and then considered. Councillor Ewing.
When we first discussed this issue, we actually put forward our own idea that was one side was double yellowed and not the other, so vehicles could always get through, which we submitted as part of our response to Hattock and to the highways, etc. They said that we couldn't actually put forward an amendment because that wasn't what was on the table. And, with some of the reason the conclusion sort of came to what it did was because we realised that the safety of people has to come first, but there is no option to say, I think we had the debate about whether the left or the right-hand side should be double yellowed, but we're not allowed to say that, and we've been told that quite clearly by them. And when the Mayor was here at the last meeting, he said to us that that wasn't an option, although that is what Tavistock Town Council formally sent forward, that we tried to, come down the middle line. I personally have to say, I go there every day to Westbridge Cottages, and it is a nightmare to park. When you're only in somebody's property for 45 minutes, trust me, it's a nightmare. But we did try to come down in a different way. And I think basically we were left with no choice, because it was either this or carry on as you are. Well, we can't exactly carry on as we are either. So it's a bit of a conundrum that I think the only thing we can do again is send off what's here, but also send comments, have you thought of negotiation with the vets that you can have an evening pass or whatever to park in their car park, or Morrison's or whatever, but we can only send those as a recommendation, and they can take it or leave it or whatever they want to do with it. They don't have to acknowledge or anything, but we can at least feel that we've done something for the residents of Westbridge and of Glanville Road.
Thank you. Councillor Squires.
Surely we could make a representation as a council to the Devon County Council that they should take this matter into consideration as part of their planning issues for the parking in Tavistock period.
Yeah.
The reinstigation of parking space as was.
Thank you. Can we take this in two parts? The first is to deal with this order as it stands. The recommendation before you is that it be implemented. Are you willing to accept and endorse that, or do you wish to do something different? Councillor Ewing?
I think, as I've just said, we don't really have any choice at the
Well, we
moment.
have three choices. One is to accept it, one is to reject it, and one is to argue that
but as we came
have
up with
not quite so much yellow paint.
Yeah, we came up with, I think we support as they do, but send our comments again and ask them to look at that. For traffic orders come up all the time.
Sure.
They have them once or twice a year. through county and we get them. So, you know, we can just put it down for, can you next time look at this a bit more seriously? I might have to get the steamer out though.
Councillor Crawford. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's a question really about implementation. We may or may not at this meeting give an opinion, but what is the likelihood of this traffic order being implemented? Because I heard at another meeting that there are hundreds of traffic orders on the books, as it were, and lots of them haven't been implemented. So we may be agonising about our choice over the decision for it to be left with, is it Devon County Council? I'm not really sure. Devon County Council to leave it on the books and for nothing to happen. Is that the likelihood?
I don't know whether that's a likelihood or not. All I would say is that we have been asked by the chairman of HATOC to respond to these to this draft traffic order, and that is why it is before you now. What happens after that is out of our hands. Councillor Ewing.
I think basically when the Mayor summed it up, it was because normally HATOC make the decision, and probably on the day there was an awful lot of disgruntled people for both sides, and they bailed out really and just left it to us. And that's how I felt. I'm sorry about the Mayor is absent, but he can listen to me if he wishes, that actually they bailed out because there were so many people, and I don't think they expected the level of feeling between the two camps, whether you're Glanville Road or Westbridge Cottages, and it was just easy to say, oh, let the town council decide, because whichever way then, we become the bad guys. You know, a proportion are going to like us and another proportion of the other camp aren't. And I have never known, you know, in my 15 years of being a councillor, that HATOC actually refer it back to a town council. They always just make the decision. So I think it was a bit of a cop-out, really, and it's just been put back on us.
Yeah, exactly.
Councillor Williamson.
A question or a statement, but it seems to me, as Councillor Ewing said, they bailed out, they've given us the decision, and we have no say-so about selecting the option beyond that is the option. The fact is that our community is torn by this. There are alternatives, as has been discussed. There is plenty of vacant parking in the area, and I won't go into detail about it, but you can use your eyes and see it. That's available in the evenings that could be purchased, rented or whatever to overcome this, and it's not part of the discussion. And we are now going to make a decision that pleases no one, the people in Westbridge Cottages or the people in Granville Drive, be put into a corner and painted as the bad guys for recommending something that's unpalatable to one group or the other, or both, and that's just not right or democratic in my view, because we will be answering to our voters at some point for making a decision which was extremely finely balanced, although I accept the public safety here and the fact that emergency vehicles need to access Granville Drive, and if somebody unfortunately suffers as a consequence of that not happening, we will be in even worse a position. So on that grounds alone, I would have to say the HATOC recommendation of yellow lines on one side would have to be gone for. But this is wrong as far as how they've put us in a very difficult position.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Palfrey.
Deputy Mayor. I'm with my fellow councillors in this, thinking that we are being left as piggy in the middle. But I would take a different approach to it and say, well, let's throw it back at them and reject it. So they actually take the can, as opposed to us supporting it, even if it goes against any safety, which, when we look at this, we haven't had any hard evidence, and I know it's very difficult to find evidence which might happen. You know, it might be a fire brigade can't get through, but it's difficult to prove it might not happen if it isn't actually happening. So I would suggest that we object to their proposal purely on the grounds that they then make the decision, and we can say that we, if you like, sat on the fence because it's their decision which they have to put up with, and it's too close for us to call.
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm not convinced that your strategy would have the result that you're looking for, because it was made very clear to us by the chairman of HATOC that HATOC will not impose this traffic order if we say that we don't want it. So it will not put the decision back to them. This council will have made a decision. It will have made a decision to endorse the parking on pavements, because the only way that road is passable when there is traffic on both sides of the road is if the traffic on the right-hand side of the road is parked on the pavement. So that is what you would be doing. You would be saying that this council endorses illegal parking.
With respect, we wouldn't, because there are people that would be able to issue parking tickets or similar to people that were acting illegally. We're not saying we want you to park illegally, we're just saying we don't agree to what you're suggesting.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Crawford.
Forgot what I was going to say. I think I would endorse what my colleague here was saying. Sorry, I don't know who you are. And can we not put in those recommendations? Can we not look at resolving the parking problems? Because that really, it's... Yes, we don't want to end up being hated by either side, so we want to find a resolution. So can we not put forward that we object to it until such resolution is found, and these are our recommendations? And then we could, because my fear would be as well, if we support it and make these recommendations, that they don't get implemented.
Okay, thank you. Bear with me.
I think your approach is the right one. Deal with this. If members then want to make further comments, they've got the opportunity to do so. We have been asked to respond in these terms by the County Council. We should respect that because they are the decision maker, even though they may well defer to our view. And then if there are further comments, we actually pick those comments up and we make them alongside that.
Could we invite the ward members of this council to get together and put together a recommendation to go to Devon County Council on behalf of the constituents?
We could. I think what I would say is if it was going to go in the name of the council, it should probably be endorsed by council, but we could equally invite them as ward members to come together and to make representations as ward members.
Then council can consider.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay. I think this is the way we have to go forward. We have been asked by Devon County Council to respond to this draft traffic order, and we should do that. We should respect that request. I would like us to address that this evening and take a vote on what we want to say to Devon County Council. But I would also invite the ward members of this council who represent the constituents in that area to get together and to draft a recommendation to council for forwarding to Devon County Council to try to mitigate the parking problems for the Westbridge cottages.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
In which case, do I hear a proposal regarding Councillor Ewing?
I think that's a very good idea, but as two of those councillors who represent that ward are out there, and they're not in here, is that going to be possible?
How many councillors have we got for the south? It's south west, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it 4?
Alan's one. Are you one as well? Here we are. Where are we then? Southwest Ward.
Anne Johnson.
Yeah, so she's out.
Southwest. Ted.
He's out.
Alan.
Yeah.
Alec Benning.
He's got
Alex, a Westbridge cottager. Yeah.
Julia's. Yeah. So you and Alan can have a talk.
Who's are they in Southwest? Yeah.
So who are we left with on the list? Just
Alan
remind me.
Councillor Whitcomb. Councillor Lewis and Councillor Whitcomb.
Would you be willing to invite other interested councillors who don't have a personal interest to join with you to draft some recommendations to Devon County Council. Those recommendations will need to come to full council for endorsement by full council, and then could be passed up to Devon County Council to flag up the problem and offer suggestions for mitigation.
May I also say that we haven't discussed tonight, but if those double lines, yellow lines, are put where they want to put at the moment, all it will encourage people to do is to park higher up into Grenville Drive than they currently do, because it's still, you know, only a... Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, you know, and I think you need to put that in your melting pot, that actually it could just push all the traffic further up, which, and as we say, it's more of an elderly population because there's a lot of bungalows up there.
Okay.
So
we need to do something definitive. Do I hear a proposal to support the implementation of this traffic order as received? Councillor Williamson. Seconder? Yeah. Councillor Lewis. Those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Those opposed?
1,
2. So that's carried. So the recommendation from this council will be that the traffic order be implemented. But in order to try to help, we will form a subcommittee which will draft a response to Devon County Council to try to mitigate the parking problem.
Can we just get the other two councillors in?
Can we can we invite in our fellow councillors, please? Thank you. We've got another one, I'm afraid, Councillor Young. So, minutes of the Development Management and Licensing Committee, 12th of February, i.e. yesterday. Minute numbers 285 to 293. I would just draw your attention to an application by Westwood House... No, not that one. Bear with me. There it is. By David Wilson Holmes, land at Butcher Park Hill, Tavistock. You will know that this site was granted outline planning permission on appeal by the planning inspector for 110 houses with associated roadways, hard surfacing, etc., etc., etc. This was considered as a reserved matters application yesterday evening. Members of the public were present. There was quite a lot of concern expressed, particularly about surface water drainage, what impact that would have on the allotments, whether the water flow down the hill in a critical drainage area was going to add to the problems, etc. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this was effectively irrelevant, as we already had outline planning consent. But you will see that we adopted a neutral view in regard to the approved matters, but we basically made it clear that we would want to be confident that the very considerable number of conditions imposed by the planning inspector on that consent were honoured by West Devon Borough Council. That includes issues such as submitting a surface water drainage strategy and various other things which I think would help to address the concerns of the residents and the allotment holders. Just to make you aware that there was a long discussion about that. Otherwise, I think the rest of that meeting was uncontroversial. Beg to move? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So, item 8, Guildhall lease. And could I invite the Town Clerk to respond to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've agreed heads of terms, as members will be aware, with Tavistock Heritage Trust for the Guildhall lease. They're currently considering a copy of a draft full lease that's available for inspection in the office if any members wish to view that. The recommendations that you've got before you on the agenda very much flow from a meeting that we had with representatives of the trust. And the suggestion is that in order to expedite the finalisation of the lease details within the heads of terms, I should stress that Council has agreed that you appoint 2 representatives. The suggestion is the Deputy Mayor and the Heritage Lead, which is Councillor Smith of the Council, in order to participate in any discussions which might take place with Tavistock Heritage Trust. And you authorise myself as clerk, and the reason for that is a technicality in the sense that you've got to authorise an officer, you can't authorise individual members to act on behalf, in consultation with those members, to be able to agree that lease if terms can be agreed with Tavistock Heritage Trust, consistent with the heads of terms. And what that would enable us to do then would be to pass that agreement on to the Heritage Lottery Fund at that time, in order that they can consider next steps in relation to the potential award of grant from them for the Guildhall regeneration works.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, members? Happy to move?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 9, request for support from Tavistock Bid Company. I understand that this was contingent upon us receiving correspondence, which has not been received. Does the Town Clerk have a comment to make?
No, it is rather difficult in those circumstances. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm aware that Councillor Smith, who serves as council representative on the bid company, is aware of some correspondence between them and the Borough Council, so I don't know whether he wishes to add anything from that side of things, but it does place the Town Council in a rather difficult position to make an informed comment, given the fact that we haven't been approached by the bid company as to what their representations are, and had an opportunity to consider it in advance of this meeting.
Thank you. All happy? Councillor Smith.
As the Town Clerk has said, being a representative on bid, I have had sight of a letter on the subject of car parking charges, which has gone from bid to the Borough Council. I don't think we're here tonight to comment on the situation that exists between bid and West Devon. I think we're here, or should, consider the effect of an increase in parking charges to what is, or to what might be called the vibrancy and the viability of the town. You may, as town councillors, although you haven't received direct communication from bid, you may want to write to West Devon Borough Council emphasising the effect increased charges could have on our town, and ask that they seek to work with bid and others to examine methods of increasing revenue via increasing occupancy of the existing car parks.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Crawford.
Sorry, I just saw quite a lot of stuff in the local papers where people are concerned about increase in parking costs. Particularly, I mean, I think it is quite reasonable for the all-day costs. So, you know, I just wondered if they had thought, and I didn't know if they thought through more the bit about having more short-term spaces rather than long-term spaces, which would increase the turnover of parking. I think people were saying that if they parked because they worked, they had to leave their car, they paid for all-day parking, and then couldn't find a space when they returned to get to their office. So it's about workers as well. So I think it's about thinking that people can park all day to do a few hours shopping in the town and then might be moving off, and about sort of having more short-term parking rather than long-term parking to alleviate that.
Thank you.
I don't think this requires a response from us. No, we can bring it back if we receive something.
Yeah, sure. I think at the moment this issue doesn't require a response from us, but if we are, if we do receive some communication from the bid in due course, it'll come back to council and we can discuss it further. Okay. Moving on to items circulated for information only. Item 10, service reports. Paragraph 1, report from the General Manager. Does anybody wish to put any questions to the General Manager? Yes, Councillor Williamson?
It's only a comment, really, if it might help other councillors. I don't know if they've been to the Molly Owen Centre and had a look around. I just happened to be in the Pixon Lane area on business today and popped in, and I was just impressed how the Works Department had occupied the space that was really for them, how they managed to improve their situation in terms of the ability to be productive, that there were welfare facilities there, car parking, security, although there are, I mentioned to the General Manager one issue I had about that, but I thought it was an amazingly good start to get the building in use again. It was warm, it felt dry, there was no humidity in the building, even though we've had a lot of wet weather, and I was just generally impressed. I'd like to congratulate the Works Manager for taking that project forward and putting the building back into use.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we're always very happy to hear that, and congratulations. 10.2, Works Department report. 10.3, Town Hall report. And 10.4, Pannier Market. Okay, happy to receive all those. Thank you. Item 11, Finance and Other Matters. To receive for information. Report of the Assistant to the Town Clerk, and I think the Town Clerk wishes to make a comment about that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just very briefly to advise members that because we've reached the relevant point in the contract, we have reviewed and agreed an extension of the legal services contract of the Council with its existing provider, which will run us to 2022, when we will again market test it.
Thank you very much. Destination Oakhampton. Did you wish to say anything about this, Councillor Johnson?
Nothing to add to the minutes. Sadly, I wasn't able to go because 2 days before that I was diagnosed with shingles, so I'm afraid I didn't feel capable of travelling up to Oakhampton for the evening for that one.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? 11C, Town Hall and Markets Consultative Group. You should have received the notes of the most recent meeting. Tavistock Townscape Heritage Initiative. Councillor Smith?
Just as a small point, that I was actually at that meeting, and the minutes will be truly adjusted at the next meeting.
Thank you. Tavistock and District Chamber of Commerce. Anything you wish to add, Councillor Williamson? Thank you. And any update from or questions to council representatives serving on other outside bodies? Does anyone have anything to report? Thank you very much. Item 12, to receive such communications or reports as may be submitted by the Town Mayor. I have none. Urgent matters brought forward by the Town Mayor. Again, I have none. Move to part 2. Thank you.